Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're unpacking a really uncomfortable truth, one that's quietly keeping product leaders up at night. We're looking at why AI-assisted coding, despite all the crazy hype, isn't actually moving your product team forward as fast as you think. It's what we call the product velocity illusion. Basically, we're going to explore why simply shipping code faster hasn't magically given you a better, more effective roadmap.
So, let's dive right into this central paradox. Look, product teams today are shipping more than they ever have in history, right? AI-assisted coding tools have come in and completely slashed the build time on routine features. Stuff that used to take weeks, now it takes days, or literally just hours. We are objectively building faster, and yet, there's this pervasive, nagging feeling that overall velocity is just completely stagnant. So the big question is, if we're building so much faster, why doesn't it feel like we're actually moving faster?
Well, I promise this feeling of stagnation isn't just in your head. It's actually sparking this quiet, kind of anxious conversation across the whole tech industry. You've got the Financial Times openly asking, is AI productivity growth in the room with us? And over at the Silicon Valley Product Group, they formally dubbed this the AI productivity paradox. Because despite these massive, mind-blowing leaps in coding speed, the actual measurable productivity growth, it's just not matching the hype. The output is absolutely there, but the outcome isn't.
All right, Section 1. The job market's telling warning. The data actually tells a fascinating story here. As of May 2026, we've seen a massive 14% year-over-year increase in product management job postings. Companies are aggressively hiring for product roles right now. Now, you might be thinking, oh, they just need people to manage all this new code being shipped. But that is not actually what's happening.
The real bottleneck is super interesting. See, the old reality was that product management roles usually filled up in, say, 6 to 8 weeks. But the new reality? Those exact same roles are sitting wide open for 6 to 12 months. Teams don't want more throughput. They desperately need more product judgment. They're holding out for the absolute right people, because the bottleneck was never really about how fast you could build. It's about how fast you can figure out what's actually worth building, and then how fast you can find out if you were right.
Which brings us to Section 2. The broken velocity metric. Think about how your own team tracks success for a second. Most product teams still report velocity as just a single number, story points per sprint or features shipped per quarter. And for a solid decade, tracking that single number was a completely reasonable proxy for organizational health. Why? Because the actual physical building of the code was by far your dominant cost. Back then, if you were building more, you were generally doing better.
But here is the crucial point. That ratio has totally flipped. Build time for a well-specified feature is now practically a rounding error in the grand scheme of your timeline. But the time spent deciding whether that feature was worth building in the first place, and the time spent validating if it actually worked once deployed, that hasn't compressed at all. And guys, this is the very core of the productivity illusion you're likely feeling right now. AI made one piece of the product cycle dramatically faster, but just left the other two sitting exactly where they were.
Let's get into Section 3. The solution, the 3 clocks framework.
To fix this, we absolutely have to retire that single velocity number. Instead, we need to track 3 distinct clocks that are running at wildly different speeds. The first one is the decision clock. This is the time from noticing a problem to committing to a specific solution. For most mid-sized SaaS teams, this runs about 1 to 6 weeks per meaningful bet. And listen, this clock hasn't sped up one bit. Sure, AI can draft a nice options memo, but AI cannot make the difficult, high-stakes trade-off calls for you. The bottleneck here is human alignment, not information retrieval.
Next up is the build clock. This is the time spent actually coding and constructing the feature. Now, this is the clock that is genuinely transformed. A task that would have taken 3 weeks back in 2023 can now reasonably take just 3 days. But here's the dangerous trap we fall into. We treat this blazing fast build clock as a stand-in for the entire product cycle. And finally, we have the validation clock. That's the time between shipping a feature and actually knowing whether it's solved the user's problem. AI hasn't compressed this at all. In fact, you could argue it's made it much worse. Because we have this incredibly fast build clock, we're just shipping constantly, meaning unvalidated features are just stacking up on top of each other, kind of like a really risky game of Jenga, way before we even know if the first one actually solved the user's problem.
Moving on to Section 4. The high cost of speed.
The danger here is just immense. Teams that only track the build clock fall into this vicious cycle. They keep pulling forward work that's cheap and easy to build, but it hasn't actually cleared the decision clock properly. They're prioritizing output way over strategy.
And ultimately, the fastest shipping teams are often the ones bearing their validation clock the absolute deepest. On the flip side, teams using all 3 clocks, they engage in deliberate discovery. They use validation as a strict release gate, and they track true outcomes, not just output.
Okay, Section 5, Finding the Real Advantage.
Look, AI-assisted building is a genuine advantage. It's just not the one most roadmaps are optimizing for right now. To actually win, you need to follow these 3 steps. First, you've got to report all 3 clocks, not just one. Second, deliberately redirect the time AI freed up in your build clock directly into your decision clock. Basically, use that safe time for real discovery before you ever commit to code. And third, make the validation clock a mandatory release gate, not just some optional follow-up task that quietly gets forgotten by the next sprint.
Now, keeping all these clocks in sync requires some serious discipline. The source material highlights platforms like Specky to help manage this. Specky is an AI product workspace designed specifically to show its work. It literally keeps every single decision, the evidence behind that decision, and the final outcome check tied perfectly together in one continuous product graph. Using a dedicated workspace like this kind of forces your team to maintain the discipline to connect what you build with why you built it. Which brings us to the ultimate takeaway here. What's genuinely scarce right now isn't the ability to write code quickly. What's scarce is the discipline to spend that newly acquired speed on human judgment. So I'm going to leave you with this final, critical thought for the AI era. When building is nearly instant, are you brave enough to slow down your output to guarantee your outcomes? Tomorrow, take a hard look at how your team operates and ask yourself, which clock is really driving your roadmap?